Nick from Vire engines. It's a video to show you how to change the whole magneto inside the flywheel. So this is going to be possibly easier to remove because everything's brand new on this engine I've refurbished. So first of all, you get your 6mm Allen key, tap it around, take your spark plug cap off just in case you turn the crankshaft fast enough that you're going to start the engine accidentally, so that means you can't. So HT off. While you're at it, you can unscrew the HT cap because you're going to have to pass it through the rubber grommet without the HT cap on. So that goes on the top. Let's take the rest of these out. So sometimes on the very old engines they're not 6mm Allen key. They are instead a slotted screw, and I find because those weren't stainless they can rot in which case you'd need an impact driver with the correct size straight slotted bit to get those out. If this doesn't work, tapping it around with a hammer on the Allen key, then you're going to have to use the impact driver as well. There we go. Right. Last of the four. That can go safely in my box of spares to replace later. Now you've got this 24mm nut, you've got your 24mm ring spanner. Okay, the reason it's a ring spanner, you put it at the 9 o'clock position like this and tap around. Before I start, you'll notice that the sharp point on this nut is facing the centre of one of these holes, and that means you can get the cap on later with the holes in. So when you finally tighten this up, I'll show you, you have to have it in that orientation. Anyway, it comes off fairly easily, and now because I've greased this, that'll come off. Take the nut off completely. Right, now you can loosen your drive belt, so whichever end has got the slotted adjustment, you may need to slacken off, and this will allow you to get enough slack on the belt that you can take it off. That's fine. And now you know to carefully pull the flywheel off. Now I use the proper Vire puller, which cannot damage anything, but if you want to try a 3-leg puller, beware, you mustn't let the legs go inside and mash up the condenser and things, which is quite possible, and also those things have a tendency to bend as they're being done up and fire off, which could hurt you, or those things would twist out of line, so they don't actually pull the flywheel evenly left and right, they're just pulling one side, which tightens it up. Now because this has been off recently, I only need a couple of those, so this is nice and flat, that's still loose. Now tighten up, put it down to about the 3 o'clock position where I've got some compression, and bear in mind I've got the HT off, so this engine cannot start, and then I'm just going to hold this loosely on with my couple of fingers. That's it. If it was stiff, I would be bashing that occasionally. I don't need to on this engine. So now the flywheel will come off. Let's just remove my special Vire puller. If it's very stiff, you'd need all 4 screws done up quite tight, but as this has been recently rebuilt, you don't need to worry. Now you can withdraw this carefully. As you come away, nothing's going to fall out and go on the floor at this point. Okay, it's set. The key, which is in the crankshaft, make sure the key which goes in the slot is still there. Let's put this safe. Okay, now you can see the magneto. Now to get the magneto out, I need to disconnect the 3 wires from the terminal block. These 2 yellow ones, which serve no real purpose, by the way. They're for an obsolete charging circuit before the days of 12-volt batteries. They're free. And also the black wire for stopping the engine, which is also out. Now this means that those wires can go in, the HT can go in. All we need to now do is take the magneto out. So I've got 3 peripheral screws here on the magneto backplate, and you'll notice that it's slightly twisted clockwise for the timing adjustment, so it's not perfectly even in terms of in the screws in the slots. Now when you take these out, they've got a couple of little tiny washers on them. Don't lose those, and don't let them stick to anything magnetic. Keep them safe. So there's one. I like to take the bottom one out, and otherwise it sort of tilts down in my way. Right, that's 2, and then the final third one. There you go. And that is out. Now, as you can see, the magneto is just dropping out of gravity here. Sometimes they're a bit rusted in which case you can use your 24mm spanner. Just a little bit of leverage to pop it out. That will help you. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull these 3 magneto wires through, and you'll need to put a bit of grease on the grommet if it's not been greased for a while, and this slips through as easy as that. Same thing with the HT, some WD-40 or grease here, and then it will slip through fairly easily. You want to pull the actual cable, don't pull it with the magneto because this could come loose. So you're pulling the actual HT lead, and that is out. Okay. Just while it's out, I'll show you the features that a magneto has. So you have a contact breaker. These are the things which normally go wrong. This has got mirror finished contacts. I don't know if you can see that, but if they haven't, they need changing. There's a condenser here. You'll see this is a waterproof one. There's no way moisture can get inside this one, and the coil is all good. I've even put some self-amalgamating tape, unnecessary, on the joint between the HT, which is screwed in, and here. So the HT is actually copper cord, solid copper, and it's not a resistive HT lead, it's a resistive HT cap, so don't get mixed up with aftermarket parts. And those 2 yellow wires just go to this bottom coil and nothing to do with the ignition. The black wire it connects onto the contact breaker point and condenser, so if you earth that black wire, it kills this switch's operation. It's effectively having it always closed. That's why it stops the engine, because the contact breaker, even mechanically opening and closing, is not now electrically opening the circuit because you've got it closed with this kill wire. Anyway, that's all you need to know about this. If you need to change the condenser, they have to be desoldered and drifted out carefully, and when you push the new one in with a socket just pushing on the edge, make sure you do not put any pressure on this plastic, so have that hanging off the end of the bench when you're pressing down, and then you can't damage this, and resolder it. That's pretty much it with the old magneto. Okay, I'm going to pause the video just while I get the new one ready. Okay, I've got my replacement ready. So the first thing to do is to thread through the HT lead. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the tip here and down the cable to make sure that will slide through. I've got to carefully line it up with a hole, make sure the grommet doesn't push out. I'm holding that in place while it starts, and here it comes. I can now grab hold of the HT, pulling it carefully through, and then offering up as it comes up into position. HT. My grommet is actually moving. When I'm nearly up there, it's time to get these 3 wires up. They normally go up on the right hand side. They'll fit in this slot here between the mounting foot for the back plate and the casting which is holding the ceiling. There's a kind of cutaway in the casting. You can lay those 3 cables in there, but first of all we've got to get them up through the grommet. So I'm going to start with the yellow ones. I doubt I'll be able to push all 3 through simultaneously, so one at a time is okay. Just get this out of the way if it helps. There we go. Let's get one up. Sometimes the wires need twisting, so they go up first. There's the yellow one, number 1. The yellow one, number 2. And then the black one, which is the kill wire. Once I've got all 3 coming through the grommet, I can concentrate on getting the cables closer and closer to the final position. I'm going to make sure they're laying in that track, push the back plate in, hold it there, and then I can just put one of the 3 screws in. So the easiest one I can see is at the top. I'm still holding it and just do that up quickly. So it's still loose, but I won't need to hold it anymore. I'm not going to do this up tight at the moment. Right, so now I don't need to hold it. I'm going to check inside and make sure that all these HT and cables aren't going to be rubbed by the Magneto. They're right in the back, and also that I can swivel this, which is nice. Let's put in the remaining 2 backplate screws with their washers. Let's use the correct screwdriver this time, much easier. Again, I'm just going to put this in so that they are not tight, but they allow me to swivel the back plate round. Just want to have to get down close. I've got some magnifying glasses on I'm wearing, and also another fairly vital tool I find for doing these in a boat, because this is a well lit workshop, is a head torch. These are about £2 to buy in the sort of bargain shops. I'll show you. So this is a head torch. It's very, very bright. You can put it on your head with a strap, and it helps you to light up areas that on the boat might be very dark. So now I've got all 3 in, and they're not tight. I can just check that I can rotate freely this Magneto, because I may need to do this when the flywheel's on for adjusting the timing. If you can't rotate this freely, now is the time to grease or oil this slides so that you can. So I'm going to set this to the right of the slot, so I'm pushing it clockwise, which is usually the position for the correct timing on a Vire 7. Now they're not super tight at the moment because I may need to adjust this, but they can't rattle loose. Right, now I'm going to connect these up to the block so that I can use my remote kill switch. As I say, the yellow ones don't really matter, they're obsolete technology, but just for the sake of keeping them tidy, I'll put them in the connector block. brand new connector block here. If you find these screws are tight, put WD-40 down and make sure you've got a screwdriver with exactly the right type of tip, not a worn one, and you should be able to free them up by screwing them in first. Okay, if you can get them to do a quarter turn by pushing downwards, you'd have broken the rust seal on these little brass or steel screws, and then it will allow you to unscrew them. So if there's any danger of chewing off the top of those slotted screws, try doing them up a quarter of a turn first. And finally, I'm putting the black cable in, which of course you know is for stopping the engine on the remote control switch. Right, fine. Now we've got to put the flywheel on. So I just want to, this key at the moment is turning down. I'll show you. If you want to turn the crankshaft, the easiest way is to put the nut back on and turn it, but I know from experience this is also a way of doing it, and just allows me, without damaging anything, to turn that. Alright, which I won't bother, because we've got such a lot of compression on this engine, it's going to cause damage there if I do it like that, so I'm not going to bother. Anyway, the important thing to note, which is what I was trying to show you, is that the key is in there and it's not damaged. Before you put this back on, you need to make sure that this surface is nice and smooth, or as smooth as you can get it, and this surface. So if it's got rust in there, you clean it out with a Dremel sanding drum or some sandpaper, and then make sure you decontaminate this from any kind of dust or abrasives that you've caused. Wipe it out with tissue, and you can just put a thin smear of grease over this to stop it rusting in future. Anyway, this one doesn't need doing. Another thing you can do is put a little smear of grease on the outside of the Magneto. I'll tell you why, because if the engine floods in salt water, I have noticed that these can seize these rust to the flywheel. I've had that once, and I thought the engine was seized, but actually it was just the flywheel seized. So a bit of grease on there is going to stop it seizing, isn't it, in that event. So I'm lining up the slot and I'm feeling it. Oh, and make sure that your contact breaker points are not going to get hit as this goes on. Now this should just slide on if you've got it lined up correctly. Let's just check. Where's the key? Key is nearly down, that's correct. That's the right orientation. And then this should go on. Just jiggling this backwards and forwards. That's it, that's fine. Now I can put my nut on. There's no washer underneath this nut, I should stress. What stops the nut from coming loose is inside the cap. It will hold the nut in position. Okay, so you don't need a lock washer. In fact, it will do damage if you put a lock washer under this nut, so don't do it. Right, doing this up. Remember, I've still got the HT lead disconnected, so this engine cannot start. Now I'm going to go through the tightening procedure here, which is to put this at about 3 o'clock and tack it. Okay. Now what I want to do is get the sharp end of the nut pointing to the centre of the hole. So never loosen it at this point. You need to just tighten it a bit more. Keep checking. You haven't gone too far. There. That's just a tiny bit more. And that's now pointing to the centre of the hole. So I know I can get the cap on. So at this point we need to check the timing is correct and then tighten up those 3 peripheral screws. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the HT cap on now, which screws on. The inside here is a little pointed, like a wood screw, and it goes into the end of the copper cable. So do that up until it gets tight, and you know you've got as much on as possible. Put it on the spark plug. Okay, and we're ready to run. Oh, actually we're going to need to start the engine up, so let's put this Dynastart cable on. Right, and then we need a bit of tension on the adjuster. This should be fine. How much tension do you need? You need as much tension so that it doesn't squeal when you're starting, and then maybe 10% more tension for a safety margin. But if you go crazy and put massive tension on this, all you're going to do is start wearing the belt out quickly and possibly reduce some horsepower if you've got a corroded channel, because it will take more energy. So let's get this going. Now I'm going to check the timing. I'm using a timing light to check the firing point lines up. I'll show you that, but you can use the visual method of the contact breakers opening. So I've got yeah. So I need to darken it down possibly. I don't know. It's a very bright day here today. So to get this to work, I may need to adjust the timing on it. Close, but not perfect. So I'm just going to rotate that appropriately. So I just need to slacken off those screws a little bit, the 3 peripheral ones. 1, 2, 3. And then in order to lever it, you really want is a fairly substantial screwdriver, and get it between the, I would say, to advance it, get it between the screw and the coil, and you can just turn it as much as you think is necessary, clockwise or anti-clockwise, in that space. And then of course never run it with loose screws. So we're now going to tighten up our screws, and these are now tight enough that we could undo them in years to come, but they're never going to shake loose. Right, let's just check that again. Spot on. Okay. So the last thing we need to do is just put on our cover, which is like so. Make sure you can visually see through the holes, and one orientation it should line up. You can get your screws back in. Any engineer knows if you've got multiple screws in one thing fixed to another, you never tighten up the first screw before you add the others. You get all of your fixings in, started by a thread or two, and then you progressively tighten. That way everything sort of centralizes and is easy in life. You're not fighting something with a very slight misalignment. So I've got those finger tight, and I'm going to take the HT lead off so the engine can't start. There it is. And now I'm just going to tap this in the same way. Let's call this the inertia method, because instead of blocking the flywheel, which could damage the wood rough key, I'm just using the inertia, which is about 1 kilo or 2 of the crankshaft flywheel, which is easily going to outweigh the tiny inertia of these bolts, which are just maybe 10 grams. 1, 2, 3, 4, and always go back to the first one, just check. So they're not going to shake out, and also the next guy can get them out. HT lead back on, and then if you've got a belt guard, you can install this. Do you need a belt guard or not? Well, this particular engine's going to a customer where he's got children, and it's possible that the engine's running and the children put their foot on here to use it as a step, in which case they could injure themselves or get hair or rope dragged in here accidentally. So this is going to protect fingers, feet, ropes accidentally getting knotted up around this flying belt. But on the negative side, if you've got an engine which is well underneath the cockpit and nobody is going to be dropping or treading onto here, I would say don't have a belt guard, because it does obstruct access to the electrical connector and it makes adjusting the belt a bit more fiddly. The other thing you notice, I've rounded these off before I had it painted, because they do have sharp edges which I didn't like. So if you're going to fit one of these, get it on your grinding wheel and round these off to nice safe radiuses so you won't hurt yourself. So it's up to you. Okay, well, I finished this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know any feedback. It's Nick from vireengines.com, and remember, I'm supporting all of you free here on YouTube, so do support me by visiting my shop where you can get free information on all of these parts. You can buy the top quality original specification or better upgrades and keep this engine going in the future, which is going to save you thousands. But without my expertise, it's a bit of a gamble, so I honestly think it's going to save you money getting your parts and advice from me on this engine. Okay, bye for now.